and would try to give you more time for discussion. So please feel free to engage and take the benefit of presence of Dr. Tyagi. I will also chip in wherever it is possible, but sir is the person who has been involved in, has guided several countries in doing these trials, and has been leading these efforts very actively. So I would like urge you that you can ask as many questions and clarify your doubts as you manage. And another thing that we want to convey the message through these presentations is also that the systems are well set. There is no problem. The testing, if a wonderful technology has been developed by your researchers, give them a chance. There are very, very good procedures already developed to ensure the proper research and the proper and the safe research to pursue in the phased testing pathway. So with these, I would stop here, and we would actually be requesting Dr. Tyagi to speak on the phase 1. But as Dr. Gauri said yesterday, and as we all agree, if there is any questions that you have from yesterday's presentations, any doubts, anything, you are free to ask now. We can discuss that before Dr. Tyagi starts his presentation. Thank you. Anybody, any doubts, anything you wish that, in fact, we are going to make the training modules out of these presentations. So if you think any of the points need to be elaborated, or they need more attention, or they don't need an attention, please feel free to share with us, because these guidelines are for you, your work, and your experts are working with us. All of us can work together and come out with a really workable guidance document and a workable training document.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Ahuja. We will actually give 5 to 10 minutes for questions or any comments or suggestions. If participants want to give it. Any questions? Yesterday we couldn't take any questions because the sessions went little late actually up to 1 o'clock. So we thought today we can have any questions or comments or is there any comments or questions? Dr. Ahuja, no one is.
I think we can move ahead, and because everything is interlinked. So please feel free to ask questions anytime after any presentation, or maybe at the end of these 4 presentations. So I think we'll request Dr. Tyagi to kindly initiate his presentation. Sir, please.
Thank you, Dr. Vibha. I'll take just half a minute to upload it. Are you seeing my slides?
Yeah, yes.
No?
Yes, sir. Perfectly fine.
All right. Thank you very much. Well, thank you, Dr. Vibha, for setting the tone of the today's discussions. Let me just tell you that risk assessment is required at every stage of the work with the GM mosquitoes. Whether we undertake the laboratory studies or we take the intermittent study of contained cages in the field, or even the open field studies, the risk assessment has to start right from the very first step of our studies. So this has to be borne in mind, that the GM mosquito with which we are dealing here will always be subjected to an assessment determining its risk to the environment and to the human when it is finally released in the field. One very important question that comes to the mind is what is the purpose of risk assessment of the GM mosquitoes? We all know that the mosquitoes are the true flyers. They can fly and they are the blood suckers. They feed on the human blood. They also transmit many deadly and debilitating infections. So it is very clear, right, from the very first understanding about the mosquitoes that there is a risk assessment requirement with the GM mosquitoes. So I will just go through the very purposes of determining the risk assessment. The purpose of the risk assessment of GM mosquitoes is to identify and evaluate risk to the health and safety of people and the environment from the release of the GM mosquitoes when compared with the non-GM version of the mosquitoes, and to characterize the risk on the basis of severity and likelihood. The three factors which are involved into this definition of the purpose of risk assessment are very important to have the risk assessment on the GM mosquito when it is being subjected to the laboratory investigation. The risk assessment and risk management must be focused on the particular GM mosquito. Now that would mean that GM mosquitoes are being developed through an array of the varied systems, and every particular system will have its own way of determining the risk and managing the risk. One particular definition might not fit into another system of developing the GM mosquitoes, but nevertheless, this is very, very important to understand that whatever system is applied to develop the GM mosquito, the risk assessment and the risk management are integral with the development of the whole program. Specific risk assessment and risk management consideration will vary among various GM mosquito technologies in different phases of the testings. And this risk assessment and risk management has to be done, besides being in continuity, also in the phased manner. This cannot be jumped over from the initial laboratory investigation over to the final end product of the field studies, and then we can release them into the community. It cannot happen. This is mandatory that all the GM investigations have to pass through mandatory phased testings. Therefore, phase testing has been recommended for all GM mosquitoes, in which the new GM mosquito strategy moved from laboratory to testing in more neutral environment under confined conditions. We know that the confined conditions mean here whether they are caged field conditions or they are open field conditions in smaller areas. And finally, to the open release where the GM mosquito is released in the community, in essence. What are these phase testing pathways with respect to the GM mosquito? A phase testing pathway is recommended for GM mosquitoes with systematic assessment of safety and efficacy, that is the risk assessment as well as the management, whether we go or do not go further at each step of these phased testing pathways. These include 4 phases. First 3 are related to the testing of various activities of the characteristics of the GM mosquitoes, and the 4th one is basically to determine the surveillance or to carry out the surveillance on the various characteristics that the GM mosquitoes bring about in the field or among the community. The whole pathway of the GM mosquito through different phases is like this. From the very early understanding about, like we discussed about the biology of the mosquito, which form the very basis of the whole program of GM development. Therefore, we first come to the laboratory phase, the phase study 1. Then it goes to the phase 2, which can be a large contained structures, as well as a very small ecologically confined field trial. Then to the stage where there is no confinement and the mosquito is able to be released into the community or into the nature for final show of its impact on the control of the vector as well as the disease pathogen. And following this, the monitoring or surveillance part of the whole investigation for a longer period in order to determine all those characteristics which will follow the release of the mosquito in the community. All the three phases of the testings, from the laboratory over to the confined and then to the open field investigations, will have their own very specific characteristics to be performed on the GE mosquito. Now, we need to understand about the wild mosquito first. Then we have to compare the GE mosquito with the wild mosquito in every stage of the development, morphological, phenotypic development, the genetic constitution, the physiological and other activities with the wild in order to develop a proof of concept that the GM mosquito is working absolutely parallelly to that of the wild mosquito, and it does not cause any other kind of a characteristic which can be inimical, which can be dangerous, or which can cause some kind of a hazard when it is to be released finally in the nature. The most important thing in the overall pathway of the testings is the site selection, because this site selection must have certain characteristics which will not only give all the needed epidemiological characteristics of the vector's involvement in the disease transmission, but this should also be able to show that there is virtually negligible risk involved in the release of the mosquito. These three phases in panoramic display will appear like this. The phase 1 study is basically a laboratory study. This laboratory study can be the usual laboratory, which is modified to the ACL2 level laboratory. That is the arthropod containment level study. And the second will be in the field, but it may be caged, or it may be in a way a small area where the mosquitoes, GM mosquitoes can be released and they can be contained, they can be confined still and cannot be allowed to loose into the nature. That also can be another way of doing the phase 2. And finally, it will be a open field release of the GM mosquito, where the mosquito, as per its characteristics, can fly freely up to about 500 meters, where the study like RRM, that is the release recapture of the mosquitoes, will be performed. Now, when we do the investigations of the GM mosquitoes, either in the laboratory or in the contained cages, there would be always a necessity for having a comparator to stand parallel to all the investigations on the GM. The choice of non-modified comparator, that is Aedes aegypti collected from the wild, will be essential in risk assessment of any kind of hazard associated with the transgenic mosquito. In phase 1, that is the today's central theme, the ancestral laboratory line from which it was derived is considered appropriate comparator. The ancestral laboratory line is the one where the laboratory uses a wild line from any area around it, and the GM mosquito which is developed is allowed to be compared in all its feature and characteristics, both separately as well as when they are crossed together. So this comparator will be able to allude to the differences, if at all anything is arising in their physical viability or genetic variability. Now this has one disadvantage also, and this disadvantage is that following large number of the crossings of the filial generations, the fitness of the line or the mosquito is lost out. So it has to be understood that the fitness of the GM mosquito is not lost out, however number of the filial generations are developed. There is some disturbance of the conversations among the participants. Thank you. Now, all through, one should have a control on the various results or observations of these laboratory-based investigations. There must be a clear understanding that any point where the results are not coming as per the principles of the investigations, that is when the comparator is there and the GM mosquito is allowed to show the its own trait. If they are not matching with the comparator, the experimenter must be in a position to decide whether to go forward or not to go forward. So there is always a need to plan clear stated performance milestones, at which point the project either proceeds to the next level, that is from the laboratory to the caged field level, or to modify, or the trial is ultimately to be discontinued. The consequences of the trials become greater from physically confined to the ecologically confined and open field release. So one cannot take the risk after assessing all the observations and results of the laboratory investigations, that if there are any disturbing results, if there are any uncomparable results, the decider or the experimenter must decide whether to go forward or not to go forward. Continuous monitoring is the hallmark of all investigations at every phase of the testing. Now let us come to the point of the laboratory investigation. Laboratory investigations are basically the caged observation or caged experimentation done in our normal laboratories or ACL2 laboratories. The ACL laboratories have the benefit that they confine the investigations within the confinement of the laboratory and do not let any mosquito, whether the GM or the wild, or any generation of the crosses between these two to escape, which is the major issue with the regulator. The regulator understands that mosquito is a blood feeder, that mosquito is the one which is transmitting the infection. So they are always having this question in the mind, whether a GM mosquito, particularly the female, which is involved in the transmission of the disease is escaping the confines of the laboratory testing or not. These trials allow preliminary assessment of whether GM mosquitoes demonstrate the desired biological and functional characteristics in parallel to that of the wild mosquito. Limited information on the stability and effect of genetic modifications is available at this early stage. And this is very important to understand. The more information we develop at the laboratory level, laboratory testing level, the more will be the understanding towards future testing, and less will be our fears about the risk that would be arising out of the GM mosquito testing in future. So it is very important that the laboratory investigations are done flawlessly, they are done extensively, and they are done with an understanding that the mosquito GM is not going to cause any harm by making a risk assessment right in the beginning onward. The laboratory or the ACL looks like this. This can be of any size, but reasonably bigger, because there are many specific chambers to be developed. One very specific chamber is for the rearing of the mosquitoes. Both the larval and the adult culture rooms have to be separate. They have to be partitioned, and the mosquito larvae, when pupae are formed and the adults are emerging, they are not to escape the rearing chamber to any other chamber. Similarly, there has to be a working documentation chamber. There has to be the chamber where the glassware, etc., are to be autoclaved. And similarly, there would be a laboratory where all the basic experiments with the genetics of the mosquito, crossbreeding, etc., would be done from time to time. So the laboratory has to be self-sufficient without being dependent on any other requirement, from outside. There has to be a very restricted entry to the lab. The various feature or fixtures to be required inside the laboratory, which I talked about, whether the rearing part or culture part or autoclaving part, have to be very spaciously built, and they need to be partitioned in a way that one culture should not be able to mix with another culture in any way, neither from the larval to larva, nor from the larval when the adults are formed from the larval or pupal stages. They will be able to escape to another room where the adults are already being cultured. There has to be some understanding that only people who are concerned with the laboratory or who are concerned with the monitoring will be making an entry into the laboratory. Every individual, every now and then, every person cannot enter these laboratories, because there will be a risk of some kind of a contamination either inside, or the mosquito which are lurking or which are ambushing to run out may get a chance to get out of the laboratory. Any kind of a discussion, any kind of a matter that has to be conversed has to be done in an antechamber where people can possibly stand and discuss. To enter to the laboratory of the function on the mosquitoes experiments will always be through a second entrance gate. This entrance gate is done in such a way that first a person enters into the small room and the back door is closed. Then he opens the another door of that small room, and then he enters into the actual working room. So the room is always kept closed without letting anything coming in or letting anything go out in terms of the mosquitoes. it has to be also understood that in case of emergency, if there is a mosquito, and there are certain times when you find that the mosquitoes are possibly very negligible in number, but they are there in the laboratories, and which you need to immediately take care of with the help of a electrical racket, so that no mosquito in any condition escapes the laboratory. So this is one of the major situation where the regulators are always worried what to happen if the mosquito escapes the laboratory. The entire working laboratory has to be double gauged, double screened, double doored. Even the AC panels and any other kind of a panel which is entering into the room will be screened in such a way that the mosquito will never find a way to run out, even if it escapes from its cage. Now, besides the facility design of the laboratory, the most important thing now is the study design. We had been talking in past about the various experiments that are conducted from the moment of mating of the mosquitoes down to the oviposition, and then embryonated or non-embryonated egg, their fitness, and then the larval growth and determination of the GM larvae and the non-GM larvae, and so on and so forth. So phase 1 investigations basically include small scale laboratory studies for efficacy and safety of testing, followed by testing larger population cages in the laboratory, which I in one of the slides had shown that sometimes all the investigations could not possibly be performed in one laboratory. Therefore, to perform an experiment requiring release of the mosquito to characterize a feature like reproductive fitness or mating competitiveness, you require a bigger ACL2 kind of chambers. So you need to have those facilities for performing some experiments. Phase 1 trials allow preliminary assessment of whether GM mosquitoes demonstrate the desired biological and functional characteristics with an eye towards future efficacy and safety. Please do remember at this point that the laboratory investigations basically give you data only related to the entomological part of the entire GM investigations. It does not give you any inkling about the data related to the epidemiology or related to the interaction of the GM mosquito with the pathogen. It gives you all characteristics, and which are all very important, related to only the entomological indices in the biology of the mosquito. There are as many as almost a dozen different kinds of entomological data or studies needed to be done in the laboratory. I have already shown you in one of my presentations in recent past those kind of investigations. I will list out here only what is to be done in case of those investigations. Basic description of the transgene, including its sequence, insertion site, phenotype and inheritance are to be investigated. This information will be used during the phase 2 and phase 3 to confirm the GM mosquito's characteristics. That is, testing for various filial generations, whether the fitness is being governed completely or not, and whether the GM mosquito is performing without any change in its behavior towards the pathogen. That means sometimes the regulators have a question in their mind whether a changed genetically modified mosquito, the GM mosquito, is able to transmit the pathogen at a greater intensity. So these all characteristics will emerge from the investigations in the laboratory, and they will be carried forward with a better understanding in the phase 2 and the phase 3. The stability of the transgene and its phenotype, as I said, for many filial generation, the genes should continue to express itself. The life histories of the mosquito in different forms under the laboratory conditions. The mating competitiveness is a very, very important feature which will continue till the third phase of the investigation, and this determines that the GM mosquito is not creating any kind of change into the identification by the wild female and are able to compete with the natural males in a way that the generations are inherited, and then they are of course succumbing to the presence of the lethal gene. The population suppression or replacement strategies are very important, and this will come out in a formal in a smaller way from the laboratory experiments. We can't get a very extensive result from the laboratory on the suppression or on the replacement, but there is always some indication from the laboratory experiments. The mating frequencies and egg hatching rates within the strain and crosses to the laboratory strains. As I show here in the figure, the GM mosquitoes and the wild mosquitoes, when they are compared in their fecundity, they are to be examined for their parallel behavior, for their similar behavior. The GM mosquito release simulations in large indoor cages. Modeling by taking the computer assisted programs in the wild population will determine in advance whether what amount of the GM mosquitoes and what characteristics of the GM mosquitoes are able to not only give the desired results in the field, but also that they are also completely non-hazardous from the risk assessment and risk management point of view. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor. Now we request Dr. Vibha Ahuja, Chief General Manager, Biotech Consortium India Limited, New Delhi, India, and our international consultant to present on planned field trials, key considerations. Please, ma'am.
Sir, can you stop sharing your presentation? Then I will add mine. Is it visible? Can you see my slides?
You are visible, but you can make it slide show.
Yeah, now it is okay.
Now it's fine.
It's okay, sir?
Better, but only you are there. The slide is not there.
Oh, you can't see the slides.
No, only you.
Can you share, please? Earlier it was okay, Dr. Ahuja.
It's okay now.
Okay, thank you, sir. So thank you, sir, for a very nice start for today's today's deliberations. I think we had a nice recap of the phased testing pathway, and then a detailed description of how to do the phase 1 studies and the study design. Now the next step in the phased testing pathways is to conduct the field trials, and these field trials are in two phases. The first one is the phase 2 trial and the next one is the phase 3. In phase 3 we are going for a staged open releases. As I understand, the major difference is that you have the confidence of doing the trial in phase 2, take all the observations, and upon the successful conduct you can actually enlarge it, have it at more number of sites and also the larger area. So some of the key considerations as we move from the laboratory to the field, the actual conduct of phase 2 trials will be again shared by Dr. Tyagi, but I would explain you a little bit about how to plan the field trials when as you move from the laboratory to the field. So basically you are going to have a field trial, and so we should have a localized field distribution centers. Release will be important, and then the monitoring of the site is going to be very, very important in terms of OV traps, adult trapping, etc. Actually, if I try to summarize and try to make it workable, the three important things which are very important, three important considerations for planning the field trials are: first thing will be the site selection. The second, Dr. Tyagi very nicely explained you about what would be the appropriate comparators in the phase 1. I had also mentioned that this is also very important. This is going to be an important consideration throughout the all phases. And then third will be monitoring of GM mosquitoes to collect your data, to ensure that you are able to trap them, and so on, as we see. So these are broadly three categories. Site selection is extremely important because this is going to help you increase the likelihood of detecting the significant results. So one must, one must do this carefully, and depending on your technique, depending on your type of mosquito, depending on what is the approach you are following, all that will be very important. And then of course there will be the site should be matching with your human demographics, disease patterns, and to ensure enough confinement to satisfy the requirements of risk assessment and trial design. So this is, as you see, it has to be a combination of that. It gives you results of your, what you are set out to achieve, testing of your GM mosquitoes, at the same time satisfy the requirements of the regulator, risk assessment in the trial design. The choice of appropriate site size and layout will enhance both the biological and statistical validity of the open field release. So what are the major criteria which are kept in mind? First of all, the distribution of principal vectors in the release area. Location of the mosquito larval sites is very important. Size of the open field trial site is very important. Climatic conditions, what are the climatic conditions for conduct of the trial and for the effective the management of your trial and getting the results. We should also have a knowledge of active transmission of the target disease pathogen at the site. Is it, for example, if you're working on dengue, Aedes aegypti, then you should know what is the status of the dengue in that particular site. Geographical isolation for the site is very important for the confined field trials, and this is going to be the requirement of the regulator till it is in the testing. So you should see that this is also satisfies the requirements. Existing data on the transmission dynamics of the target disease, existing surveillance and control systems which are being used for both vectors and the disease, and then most importantly, the likelihood of obtaining the regulatory, social and political approval for research on GM mosquitoes. Sometimes you might go for something which is very appropriate technically, but you are unlikely to get the approval, then all your effort would go waste. So this is also a very important consideration that should be kept in mind. There could be various reasons for that, so you being the local person would know that chances of getting approval for this particular site are high. So do your baseline research on that particular site. Unlike the plants where we have the experience of testing the plants, for varieties, and very much the site selection criteria, all those things are very well defined. But this is not so in mosquitoes. So it is really a challenge to work out in a very systematic manner. So all the things which I listed, this should be very nicely, captured in your application, that why you are proposing these particular sites. So this will also, another thing which will also depend is on the trial objective and the design. You have to keep in mind what are your scientific and technical requirements. Not that something which is geographically very suitable, but it doesn't satisfy your technical requirements. That also is not going to be important. And I already said the regulatory approval and acceptability is important. And then the community engagement and ethical considerations. You see, since you are going to have the public engagement, see, it's very different from the testing of other organisms. The mosquito testing here, it is not that, it's like when I do the plants field trials, it's a confined piece of land. So that piece of land, I am the farmer, I'm interested in growing that, so I'm doing it. If I'm not interested, the next farmer is not interested and he is not growing it, or the next institution is not interested. But here it is not like that. It's a community release. So there is going in that site, whether a person likes it or not, they are going to be part of the trial. So that's why the community engagement is so important, and this should also be kept in mind when you are doing your field site selection. So the proposal, the way how you will do the selection, there are some information. You see, I have taken all this information from the WHO guidance and also the training manual, particularly those people who did the field trials, how they followed the thing. That's the experience that I have tried to incorporate here. So while doing the field trial selection, it's better to go in a very systematic manner. Set the field trial, set the field criteria. It may be a long list initially, but then you can, do your desk research on that. Use the local expertise. Use the internet tools available in terms of, we have this Google Earth and all that, which provide all the data. Mapping can be done, and then it is always useful to have the site visits prior to, finalizing your field trial site. Do further research, check against each criteria, and then shortlist the site. And then the thing will be, like I said, presence of your, let's say the vector that you are going to work on. So in this case, if since it was Aedes trial, so they had done monitoring for the Aedes abundance in that area, and then the site has been, site or more than one site is selected. So always have a systematic process, record that process and share it with the regulator while taking the permission, because that gives them the confidence that you have done, everything. Sometimes what happens, our research scientists, they are doing wonderful job. They would have done more than what we are in fact telling them, but then that has not been documented. So that this is another thing that is to be there in when you are working with anything regulated. The documentation at every stage is very important, and that is the whole purpose of telling this. I am very well aware that most of the people who are engaged in the research on genetically modified mosquitoes in Sri Lanka, they are very much aware of all these facts. They've even done and gone and, selected the sites, done the community engagement. But my only suggestion to all of you is that please document all this against the systematic processes, record that and submit it to the regulator. That really adds a lot of value to your submission and also helps in expeditious decision making. So these are some of the things which you have to keep in mind. Of course, the other issues would be appropriate design of the trial. As I have gone through these documents and understood, of course, the mosquito experts would know better that the cluster randomized trials are considered to be the best for efficacy testing, which is going to be the first phase of phase 1 and phase 2 and phase 3. And then of course, when you are doing the trials, maybe you have to do multi-year trial or multi-season trial. So at that time, we have to keep in mind that influence of seasonal and interannual variations and also the special heterogeneity in incidence. So these are some of the things which I would request, I would suggest, that in addition to your biology document, which was like the baseline information, when you are doing your site selection and also you are looking at the other thing, look at your meteorological data and also the interannual variations. That also helps you to understand the suitability of the site. This is very commonly done even in case of plants or any other trials, where the seasonal variations or the annual variations can affect your results, because ultimately you have to defend your results that you get, the data that you generate, to confirm that there is no adverse effects. Testing is one part, but the second part is also you are demonstrating from the biosafety point of view that there are no adverse effects. So all this will be very important and help you, convince the regulator for positive decision making. So another very important in the field trial design always is, when you are going to plan the field trials, is the selection of the comparators. Dr. Tyagi explained you already. I also said yesterday. He explained very nicely about the phase one, where the original strain could be your comparator. So you have to decide what appropriate comparisons need to be made, what endpoints are we using. So I mean, there can be different studies. Sometimes there are different in a field trial itself. Field trial doesn't mean just comparing the two. Sometimes you may be looking for something else as an endpoint, and then what should be your comparator. That is something you have to decide. The choice of comparator would keep on changes in its emphasis as testing moves through various phases, and also it may be more than one comparator that you may need to check the performance across different dimensions. And also sometimes there are specific studies, study A, field trial A, part A, where I'm using maybe the conventional control system along with it, or sometimes I'm not using. So all those things will be very important. The only thing we can tell you at this point of time as a generic advice, and which is also documented in the guidelines, is that you should have an appropriate comparators, and even this should be very nicely documented and informed to the regulator. Sir has already explained you about the phase 1 testing. I'm not going to repeat that. It is going to be basically in the phase 1, it is the ancestral line. However, sometimes there may be problems related to loss of fitness. Now, as we move from the lab to the field trial, the comparator would be the wild type mosquito in that location. So generally, again, as I said, it may vary as per your what you say, the study design, but generally it would be the wild type mosquito in that location. Novel mosquito control systems incorporating GMMs may be compared with a conventional control system also. The comparison is related to the scale and purpose at this phase and addresses the risks arising across the integrated systems of control. So sometimes you may be doing it along with, maybe a spray or anything like that. So then what you have to, what all you have to see and what are going to be your comparison parameters, you have to check. The range of comparator for GM mosquitoes at various phases should reflect the range of dimensions of the mosquitoes individually, in populations, and in control systems, and which can give rise to the risk concerns at each phase. So your mind should be working in two directions, one, efficacy of my this thing versus the other one, control system, and then also the risk concerns at the each phase. You have to generate data for both. Monitoring of GM mosquitoes in field testing, this is another thing which you must use. Keep yourself as a major this thing while planning the field trial. This means that monitoring basically means how the whatever measure I have taken, containment, confinement, how is it performing with respect to minimizing the risk from the unintended release. You should take the periodic sampling of the population to determine the stability of the gene and any recognizable change in the genetics of the population that may affect the impact of the technology. This is one important thing, your own mosquito, is it behaving the same way as you had thought about it? Or when it went into the field trial, have there been any changes? It helps in ensuring the sustained quality and performance for disease control and determining whether any changes are needed in the management of the GM mosquito technology. So these are some of the things, you have to take your field trial and try to make the most benefit out of it. The as much data as you can generate will be very helpful to you in answering the concerns by the regulators or by the society before the final acceptance. You see, it costs a lot, to do all these tests. A lot cost in terms of money as well as effort. So that is why the proper planning of the trial is very important. Don't start in a hurry, but take care of all these things before we initiate the trials. So in the phase 3, particularly there have been some guidance available. So I thought I will just share with you, when you have the staged open releases, it will introduce opportunities to gather data on potential hazards in the more natural conditions. So from 1, 2 and 3, you are moving on to the further, more and more natural settings. And then you have to, maybe in the 3 and so you have to look at other vector-borne diseases also. I was reading one paper one day. They said it is not, if you are having the Aedes aegypti control. The problem is not that how much it is getting controlled. It will get controlled.Maybe some little efficacy difference may be there, but the challenge also is to study whether the albopictus is becoming more prevalent. Although these concerns may not be relevant, but then may not be scientifically tenable, but then these are the questions which regulators are going to raise to you. So you have to keep in your trials provision for monitoring all these things, so that tomorrow if some question is asked to you, you can show that no, the incidence remained the same. Otherwise, they will ask you to repeat the trial, or they will ask you to redo the thing, and it will be again a lot of waste of time, effort, and money. So at the end of the phase 3, normally the GM mosquitoes would be on the verge of routine use as a public health intervention. So that's your target. And that's why it is very important that you should have data on disease transmission, ecological interactions, and the spatial characteristics. Dr. Tyagi also already mentioned to you that standard operating procedures are a must for each stage of your work. You should have the documented SOPs which are available to all the trial site managers, all the technicians, all your scientists who are going to work, even the staff, they should be familiar with it. So whenever we have done, as I said, I have personally more experience in the conduct of the trials for plants, but even there, we prepared the SOPs specific to our crop, and then we actually went to the trial site. We had a kind of an interaction, what we called an interaction training or workshop or whatever you may call it, where each and every person who's going to be associated with the trial was informed about these SOPs, and they had to follow this. So SOPs would cover what? SOPs should be there for the planning of field trial. Transport. How is your transgenic material going to move from laboratory to the field prior to the release? See, transport data itself should be there. If somebody does mismanagement and it is sprayed on the way or whatever, then you will have no record where your precious material has gone. And it is very important to have SOPs not just for the regulation or the biosafety, but for protecting your own technology. See, look at all the efforts being made. We had this presentation from Nilmini Singh and Dr. Ranil. They are doing wonderful work, and now they did one work, and now they have to. Yesterday we heard that they thought it would be effective against all the 4 strains, but it is not. So they are reworking on it, and they are going to have these strains which will be workable against all the 4 strains. So all this effort has gone, and so you don't want your material to be wasted. So how the material will be moved from lab to the field? There should be a very well defined SOP there. There should be protocols to ensure the site security, criteria for release strategies, and then surveillance during the trials and post trial removal of the material. In case cages are there, how they are going to be removed. So every step of this, there should be standard operating procedures. We have not prepared these for our work, but I can definitely share if any of you wants the plants SOPs that we have, and they can be prepared using the same and extending it further for an insect, that's the silkworm. But those are like a very good indicative start, and one can develop the own SOPs if they are not there. So that's all I would say. These are some basic requirements for planning the field trial when you're moving ahead to test your material from laboratory to the field. Thank you very much. And now Dr. Tyagi will take over and he will explain you about testing, which is the open field trial. Thank you, sir. Thank you all, and over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll take just 1 minute. Are my slides visible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right, I'll make them. I'll make.
Slideshow.
Yeah, I'll make them slideshow. It's fine.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Well, Dr. Vibha has in fact told many things which possibly I forgot or I could not emphasize on in my preceding speech. One particular message that she conveyed was about the SOPs. SOPs are indeed very important for any laboratory, for any experimentation, and everybody involved, right from the technician on to the scientist concerned, the managers concerned, they all need to understand about the SOPs in common. So this was one very important point which I did not emphasize, but Dr. Weber very kindly took over it. Thank you very much. The background of the transformation from lab to the caged field study is very important to be understood beforehand. Once the transgenic mosquitoes have been created in the laboratory and show promise in laboratory, and semi-field contained trial open field release will then be tested. That is the final one, the phase 3. The release is designed to better understand the effectiveness of GM mosquitoes and any side effects that could become apparent under more realistic conditions, as Dr. Weber rightly said, that the comparator need not be exactly the same opponent species. This can be something else at the end point when we determine the GM mosquito is giving output which is important and needed some other comparator. So this is very important step by step that we understand. The care must be therefore taken in the design and implementation of the field trials. We will come to this very important issue. These considerations are especially pertinent because the mosquito is a vector of human diseases. And just now, Dr. Viva pointed out on a very important subject that sometimes when we are targeting a species like Aedes aegypti through developing the GM mosquito and suppressing or replacing the population of the wild population of Aedes aegypti, we might succeed in that effort. But at the same time, There is another corn-specific species called Aedes albopictus, also present in the same environment, in the same habitats, in the same conditions. And when one population of one species is depleted, the other species might get chance to flourish on the cost of the another one. So what is and that species is also transmitting same disease which Aedes aegypti is transmitting. So how to tackle it? This needs to be tackled, as Dr. Viva rightly pointed out, that we need to keep ourselves wide-eyed when we are making observations on the experimentation at the lab level, at the caged field level, and in the open field investigations level. We need to understand the behavior of our GM mosquito, whether it is performing perfectly in the manner as we want, or there is a different outcome coming in the field, in the populations of either Aedes aegypti or any other species like Aedes albopictus, which share exactly the same ecological, physiological, and biological features as that of Aedes aegypti. So the transgenes are designed to spread through the mosquito population at faster than Mendelian rates. This is very important to understand, that the GM mosquito which are developed, they multiply and they disseminate at much faster rates than the Mendelian principles of inheritance, and therefore we need to be very careful by developing a statistical estimate as to how much releases are to be made into the nature, which will be bringing out the optimum results. We need not release in the end of the experiment either very high number of the mosquitoes, because in some ways even the males which are released, they may cause sometimes some kind of a nuisance. So therefore it is very important that we understand about the progeny of the mosquito and the pedigrees which will be formed, which they will go for spreading at a much faster rate than Mendelian rates of inheritance. In the phase 2, we perform several very important investigations which we did not do in the phase 1. And one investigation is the determination of the competitiveness of our GM mosquito in a rather more realistic condition. Though it's a caged condition, the space given to the mosquito to behave is rather more liberal. The mosquito can choose to behave in its own way, whether to mate or not to mate, whether to mate immediately after emergence or to delay it, whether to take the feed in one or whether to take feed in more than one time. So all these variations in the mosquito's behavior are characterized in the phase 2 investigations. And then the most important thing to realize that by accident or in a natural way, if some mosquitoes escape, what to do as an emergency plan to contain those mosquitoes from spreading. All these things are done in the phase 2 investigations. The testing in phase 2 may be undertaken in physical confinement, sometimes termed as containment, and or small scale ecologically confined field release as indicated below. The decision about the requirement of one or both components of phase 2 testing will depend on nature of the GM mosquito technology. Sometimes it is a technology where a riddle gene is involved. Sometimes it is a technology where possibly we are using a gene-derived technology, where sometimes even the Wolbachia-based technology. So the whole investigation will flow in terms of the kind of GM mosquito technology undertaken. So the prior knowledge of its effects in other environments are important, and we need to continue to assess the risk involved, like the laboratory investigations in this second phase of the investigations as well. Now, I have already shown you the kind of the caged field investigation structure, and if I show you the anatomy of such a caged field trial, we find that instead of making a 10 by 10 or 10 by 12 laboratory rooms in the ACL2, we here develop something like 6 meter, that means roughly 18 to 20 feet wide, or maybe more than that, in the space of the given rooms for experimentation. So this kind, and the height is also more than what we generally have even rooms of the laboratory. So it provides the GM mosquito a kind of an environment which is very close to the open field trials, and the final consequences, final outputs of the investigations are relied upon more closer to our phase 3 investigations, because here the mosquito is having more liberal movement. This refers to the trials performed in large outdoor cages that simulate the disease endemic setting, but minimizing the possibility of escape. I told you there is developed a emergency plan for any kind of mosquito that might escape from the caged structures. I'll show you in some of the slides. We make those arrangements so that even if a mosquito is escaping, it will not escape from the area of the experimentation. The escape is highly unlikely due to the kind of the physical barriers and special procedures, that is the SOPs followed in such a consideration of the escape by accident or by nature. Such trials allow rapid termination and simple detection of escapees. So by any chance, if a mosquito tries to run away, tries to fly away, it cannot fly out of the cage. In case it does, it cannot fly out of that area because the emergency plan is already put into action there. Here I'll show you, if you look at the anatomy of the physical contained field cage structure design, you see first of all the whole structure, a single structure, is made lifted upon the basement or the ground by putting them into kind of the bowls or kind of the structures which are first of all ant trappers. Ant are very dangerous to the mosquito culture in our laboratories. They make entry through many pores in the laboratory, and they can devour and spoil the entire culture. So therefore, all the stumps, all the pillars of the constructions of the structure are dipped into a kind of a trough which is having regular a sizable amount of the water mixed with some kind of a kerosene or some kind of a detractor to the ant, and the ant cannot run over the structure. Number one. Number two, all the cages are made in such a way that virtually equivalent to the nature environment is provided to the cages. They are aerated. They are provided even with the kinds of the air conditions or cooler in order to maintain the desired amount of humidity and the temperature at which the mosquitoes would be performing more or less naturally. So all these things are provided into a very wide structure, physically contained field cage made a little away from the your laboratories. But it must be remembered that the construction of such a cage has to be made in an area where the mosquito Aedes aegypti has been naturally prevailing. That means the conditions outside, the abiotic factors, must be supporting the proliferation of Aedes aegypti in that environment. This kind of selection is very important. Otherwise, the caged structure, we may try many times to develop the experiment, but the experiment might not flourish just because the conditions around the structures were not conducive. So therefore, in many of the figures given on the below, you can see how the structure is internally safeguarded from the ant, and work is carried out by producing more or less a natural environment within the cage, even by providing a small plant, so that carbon dioxide, which is naturally important for mosquitoes to behave, to get attracted to the blood feed, is provided to the emerging mosquitoes. Now, compared to that, physically confined structure, cage structures, there can be another way to carry out the investigation, and this is to develop a ecologically confined scenario for carrying out the phase 2 investigation. This is a little more advanced and virtually 100% natural investigations being done on the GM mosquito. Very likely to be closer to the phase 3 open field investigation. The only difference is this is at a very small scale, and the open field investigation in the phase 3 has to be larger, on large scale. As Dr. Biba said, that can be performed possibly across many years or across many seasons in a year. And here that measure of the investigation is rather constricted. So this particular ecologically confined trial referred to small scale ecologically confined field release under geographic, spatial or climatic isolation intended to limit the spread of the GM mosquitoes into the environment. These trials are conducted in delimited areas from which escape is unlikely due to some ecological or geographical isolating factor. For example, you take it when I was working in Malaysia on the GM mosquito riddle, gene mosquito, the experiments were carried out with the wild population of the Aedes aegypti in the islands. So 2 islands were taken out for several different studies being made for developing the data for stage 2 and stage 3 testing. These include ecological or physical islands, as I just referred to you that in Malaysia what we had conducted. Now, we have got the understanding that compared to the caged physical experimentation, the ecological confinement setting is rather very close in its observation to the open field trial setting. That would mean that confined release is often a key step in the phased testing of transgenic mosquitoes and contributes to the evaluation of the strains for open release by providing a semi-natural or larger natural environment to conduct the experiment. Confined release can include, as I said previously, the physical confinement, but may also include biological, geographical, and/or temporal barriers to facilitate confinement. Any topographically, physiographically, temporally isolated structure or isolated area can be also used for conducting the phase 2 investigation. The field cages are often temporary facilities. They are made in a way to conduct only the experiment, and they are not to be carried out as permanent settings for future. However, the difference is that if there are genetically modified mosquitoes escapees from the field cage, the mosquito may become established in the environment, and this is the greatest danger or fear in the mind of the regulator, and they want a clear-cut answer what to do in such a case. Confined releases are by their nature limited in the scope and scale, and although useful at providing early evaluations and data for future risk assessments. Some information on, for example, the dispersal of the GM mosquitoes can only be obtained through open field releases. As I said in my previous speech, that the information about the dispersal of the mosquito, the dissemination of the mosquito can be had only in the phase 2 investigation, which will be more or less simulating to the conditions of the phase 3, the final investigation stage. And when we perform the phase 2, we need to be in advance prepared for obtaining or securing all the abiotic feature characteristics of the area. We need to understand about the temperature of the seasonal temperature. We need to understand about the seasonal humidity, the seasonal rainfall, the seasonal peaks of the wild population in the area. And we need to understand also that whether or not a disease like dengue, with which we generally associate the mosquito, is also existing in the area or not. If we try to carry out the investigation in an area where the disease is not prevailing, it is quite possible that the mosquito could be behaving little differently. Therefore, we need to choose the area for the phase 2 investigation where the disease, either dengue or chikungunya or Zika, dengue in by preference must be also prevailing in the area. Additional consideration for biological information to be collected in phase 2 testing will relate to the specific GM mosquito approach under consideration. And finally, epidemiological outcomes may begin to be measured in confined release trials, although for the reasons explained above, this will be uncommon due to small. You see, this will be the beginning to collect the epidemiological significance of the trials. The laboratory in phase trials did not give any inkling about the epidemiological scenario. They gave only the entomological. But the first sign of the epidemiological significance of the trial we get only from the phase 2 trials. This will be, of course, climaxed in the phase 3 stage, but then unless we have these epidemiological considerations, the investigations are not considered fully carried out. So what kind of entomological investigation do we undertake in the physically caged or confined cages or experiments? As I said right from the beginning, that mating competitiveness against the mosquito strains having a wild genetic constitution is one very important phenomenon that has to be established, that has to be regarded, that has to be completed absolutely flawlessly under the phase 2. The frequency of GE mosquito that express the desired characteristics and the level of expression in strains containing wild genetic background. We need to sustain that the genetic characteristic of the GM mosquito is not lost even after many filial generations. The capability of the GM mosquito containing local wild genetic constitution to host and transmit local pathogen. This is what I said in the beginning, that the selection of the area where the physical confinement is to be done and experiment to be carried out, it must be understood right in advance that the mosquito is also capable in nature to transmit the local infections or local disease pathogens like dengue. And the the health of the GM mosquito is very important. The health of the GM mosquito, as I said, needed to be monitored at every stage of the experiment, and this is done by two specific parameters. One is to determine the width of the cephalothoracic region of the pupae. The larger, the better is indicator of a good health of the emerging mosquito. And when the adult is emerged, we express the health of the mosquito in terms of the good size of the right wing of the mosquito from the base of the area of the wing called alula to the tip of the wing where the vein 3 is terminating. So we measure this length, and if it is somewhere between 2.5 to 3 mm, this is considered to be alluding to a very good health of the GM mosquito throughout. Well, we perform many experiments, including demonstration of the population separation, or if Wolbachia is used for replacement of the wild population. And in this entire process, what is important is that we keep a watch on the hatching rate of the eggs, because eggs laid need to be 99% embryonated, and the larvae which emerge out of the eggs should be very high, something like 90-95% of the hatching should be obtained in the GM mosquitoes. We need to also understand that when we do the ecological confinement experiments, we need to be very sure that at any stage, if we find that the experiments are not going as per the principles of the experiment, we need to take a decision whether to move forward or not to move forward. Measures of GM mosquito dispersals are carefully carried out. Because it is a phase 2 investigation, the mosquitoes are not at all allowed to disperse far long, and therefore selection of such a ecological confinement for trial has to be taken in a way where the natural ecological barriers take care of the dispersal confinement of the mosquito. Well, this is just a note on Sri Lankan situation on dengue. Sri Lanka is currently reeling under a very serious condition of dengue. Between January and April, more than 18,900 dengue cases had been detected and confirmed, whereas nearly 58,000 of suspected cases of dengue are already found out in Sri Lanka within about 4 months. The situation being very serious, it is very important that we need to connect the GM Mosquitoes Association with the local strains of the dengue, because dengue is having 4 strains, dengue 1, 2, 3 and 4, and therefore we need to understand that the transmission of these pathogen is carried out by the mosquito in a very significant manner. May I also tell you that the feeding way of transmission is not the only way by which the mosquito transmits the dengue. There are another few ways, one of which is that the dengue which is present for lifelong in the mosquito body, once the mosquito is infected, the dengue virus can transcend to its egg, then to the larvae, then to the pupae, and then to the finally emerged adult. In this whole process, the mosquito has not taken the blood meal yet, and the dengue is present in the mosquito. So it is very important that we need to determine with the GM mosquito also that the GM mosquito is whether performing this kind of transmission or not. And finally, it's a rather satisfying view that a large number of the countries currently are involved in the investigations on the transgenic Aedes aegypti evaluation. And many of the countries have already gone to the final stage of the field trial, and hopefully in recent times in future there will be some technology which will be coming to our help to save the people from deaths due to dengue. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Professor. We request Dr. Vibha Ahuja to present on data generation for safety assessment. Please, Doctor.
Thank you.
Dr. Indika, payment
just-
mail එක හම්බුණා. දැන් ආයෙත් නෑම කිව්වනේ. මම දැන් දිනෙත් එක්ක මේව කළා වුණාම කතා කරලා ඊට පස්සේ කියන මේ හම්බුණා මෙහෙමයි දැන් අපේ සිලිස්ට් නෑ කියලා මතක් කරගන්න. අගෝස්තු මාස පේමන්ට් එක අර ළමයි.
Excuse me. No. Please mute your microphone.
ඕවනේ අහන්න Dr. Indika.
केवल देख रहे हैं फीचर शेयर कंटेंट Can you see my presentation?
Yes, Doctor.
It's coming.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir, for a very, very nice presentation covering the complete all aspects of how to do the phase 2 trials. And now, as I had mentioned in the morning, that today we are going to talk about the phase 1 and the phase 2 trials and only, and then phase 3 we will talk in the morning. But before we move on to the phase 3 trial, we thought we will just, because the objective of the trial, as I indicated, was to generate data for the efficacy of your technology, as also to satisfy, the regulators and for your submissions, in terms of the safety assessment also. So as we do these trials, sir already mentioned about entomological outcomes and so on and so forth. But I would just like to, through this process, put in your mind that how we are moving ahead with these trials and what are our objectives at each stage in terms of the data generation, and which form the basis of my application for release, and which will satisfy all the regulator in addressing all the concerns that they have with this particular technology. So you see, for any organism, we know that regulatory agencies would require safety assessment, or what we call the risk assessment data, prior to the release of GM mosquitoes. So in case of the GM mosquito, of any organisms, they need it, and so would be for GM mosquitoes. So the data requirements would be broadly, they can be categorized into 3 categories: molecular characterization, then you have your entomological and the epidemiological endpoints. I'm talking of these scientific requirements. Other than that, there may be several other issues which may, come up. So before we talk of what kind of data we have to look for, we should have clarity in our mind on what is the objective of safety assessment in different phases of the field testing. So by doing this phased approach, you are actually doing a systematic analysis of your safety and efficacy at each step. Is there any problem? I don't know why this popped up. Okay. My slide is visible, no?
No, not up to Ahuja.
Yeah, that's what I thought. What happened? Just a minute. Is it visible now?
Yes.
Okay. So the objectives of the safety assessment we must know at whichever phase we are and what we are planning to do. What kind of data are we looking for and what are our objectives of these studies? Dr. Tyagi already explained you very nicely for the phase 1 and phase 2, but this presentation is sort of give you an overview and give confidence to the regulators, inform the regulators also that how every concern is being taken care in the phased testing pathway. So if you look at the phase 1, laboratory cages, what you are trying to do is a preliminary assessment of whether your mosquitoes demonstrate the desired biological and functional characteristics towards future efficacy and safety. So that's what you do in laboratory. Basically your thing is working, what are your biological characteristics, functional characteristics, and so on. When we move to the confined field trials, which is phase 2, here we are trying to ensure practical and reliable discrimination of GM mosquitoes and wild types is available and reliable sex selection prior to the release of mosquitoes. This was particularly when you are talking of male versus female. Then comes your staged open releases where you are trying to gain information on whether the transgenic modification has any chance to increase vectorial capacity or vector competence. And then phase 4 will be the one where we will be trying to see after the large scale mosquito deployment whether it is working or what kind of surveillance methods we are using. So as sir already mentioned, entomological and epidemiological endpoints are used to test the efficacies of GMMs in reducing the morbidity and mortality from the vector-borne diseases. These endpoints would differ according to the disease that you are targeting, the vector species, and the epidemiological circumstances. Now, entomological endpoints would, will be, of course, reduction in the likelihood of disease transmission due to the mosquito population characteristics, and the outcome will come. Basically, these parameters would actually come in the phase 1 and 2 and early phase 3. Most of your entomology. In the epidemiological endpoints, you are looking at reduction in the incidence of infection or disease in the human population. That is your ultimate objective. And these endpoints will be detected most easily when the trials are conducted in the high transmission settings, and they would be from 2, 3, and then 4. These would be the stages when you will be able to get the data on this kind of observations. So if we take that, what we said in the previous slide, so what are we actually going to do in each stage? Efficacy measurement, of course, will continue in every phase of the testing pathway. Every phase I will be seeing whether my particular organism in question, mosquito in question, is effective or not. But in the lab and cage studies, we will only have entomological outcomes will be measured. When we move on to the field trials, you would actually be seeing both entomological and epidemiological, and then entomological and epidemiological together, although the emphasis would be more towards epidemiological outcomes as you move from phase 2 to 3, and then in the post implementation surveillance, actually we would be mostly concentrating on the epidemiological, endpoints. So entomological monitoring unique to the GM mosquitoes. What are the parameters that are looked at? First is of course the molecular characterization. You have done a genetic modification. So we need to assess the transgene sequence, its insertion site, strain background, information of strains contributing to genetic material, information on the flanking sequences, methods used to generate GM mosquito lines and the sequences, original sources of vectors used for molecular transformation. You see, one thing which we have to remember all through our safety analysis, this is very important for both developers and the regulators, that every information or every planning is case by case. That is what has to be sort of fixed into the mind, that it is not that I have to look for everything to do, but whatever is applicable to my case. But you should have a logic for that. You should be logically able to explain to the regulator that this is what is for me, and this is not this is applicable to me, and I move to do this. This is not applicable to me, and why it is not applicable to me. So phenotypic stability, I had earlier also mentioned that is very important. It may show even in the phenotypic stability. Actually, phenotypes also show variation in the absence of transgenic modification, also due to genetic diversity of mosquitoes, interaction with pathogens, environmental variations. So you have to understand whether your any kind of variation is because of the genetic intervention or due to the environmental factors. So you have to be very clear about it. Otherwise, there may be some things which are happening which are not due to the effect of the genetic modification, but they are attributed to the to this impact of the modification. So like for example, very commonly in plants, I will give you a parallel example. In plants, it's very common to say, oh, our gene flow will take place and our biodiversity will be affected. See, one has to understand that biodiversity cannot be affected. It is only the near crossable, the plant which is crossed, the species with which it crosses, only there the gene can go, not to the whole biodiversity. It cannot, genes don't fly around like in the air that they can settle anywhere, but these are the things biologists know, and you have to convince them if this is not due to the genetic modification that I have done, this is a common environmental factor. And that is where, when I said, and what Dr. Tyagi explained, the biology document, the baseline information is very important. So baseline information, there is a global consensus document, but you are free to collect, you all work with mosquitoes even otherwise, so you can use any of the baseline information to substantiate your point. The only thing is such information should be in the peer-reviewed journals or very authentic sources. Fitness is another important parameter, measuring the mating competitiveness, longevity and duration of suppression replacement effect will provide key features that determine necessary scale of releases and their efficiency. Entomological inoculation rate is also very important. It describes the degree of infection risk that a human population is exposed to for a particular disease as determined by the vector population. So as I said, we have in the guidelines included these data requirements. Earlier we had put it as a separate this thing, but the expert group as well as the FAO experts had advised that it should be in every phase. So like the way I am speaking separately, but in the guidelines document, it is under every phase. Under the section on every phase. So this is just a reproduction from that. I'm not going to take much time reading all these through, because you have the guidelines document, and you would, whenever you are going to do the trials, you should be referring to that, and also try to develop your data generation sets for recording based on these kind of indications which are there in the guidelines, the generic guidance which is there in the guidelines. So phase 1 will be brief description of the transgene, as I said, stability of the transgene, phenotype, life history characteristics in controlled environment, mating competitiveness. So, it's simple thing like life history characteristic. It is so important to record because your GM versus non-GM, how they are behaving in terms of the simplest parameters should also be recorded, which will signify that it is similar to my original this thing and nothing has changed. So if nothing has changed in the life cycle, cycle or life history, that's a positive parameter for the biosafety assessment and decision making. Mating competitiveness, frequency of GM mosquitoes that express the desired characteristics and the level of expression, capability to host and transmit pathogen isolates. Then will mating frequencies, egg hatching rates, all this, as I said, the establishment of SOPs is very, very important, which should be done in the phase 1 studies when you move from phase 1 to phase 2. Now phase 2, as we thought, was entomological, as we indicated earlier, it was both entomological as well as epidemiological. So entomological activities will be again mating competitiveness, frequency, capability of GM mosquitoes, egg hatching rates and simulations. Phase 3 will be more limited releases intended to understand the delivery requirements and functionality of GM mosquitoes, such as different ecologies, mosquito demographics and seasons. Here we will be seeing the disease incidence, prevalence studies during the trials, post-treatment active and or passive disease incidence, prevalence and consideration of how long these activities would continue. In phase 3, we are still continuing with the entomological activities also, and then come the phase 4 where we will say that it requires monitoring to determine whether efficacy has diminished with time or because of unexpected effect, any changes are there in some areas. Appropriate measures of the entomological outputs that guided the development must be continued even after the trials are complete, and it would depend on the type of GM mosquito technology and the deployment strategy, and there may be a multi-year follow-up required. And also we would be looking at longitudinal passive case detection of targeted disease and other mosquito-borne diseases. So this, as I said, this will continue in the phase 4 itself. Widespread intermittent sampling to see the transgene functionality, widespread intermittent measurement of GM mosquito dispersal, and then most model refinement based on the entomological and epidemiological observations. It is since morning, in fact in my presentation, in Dr. Tyagi's presentation, we stressed that there should be go, no-go points. The review of data is very important at transition from one phase to another in the phased testing pathway, and it should be planned very systematically with clearly stated performance milestones at which point the project either proceeds to the next level or some more work needs to be done. Defined no-go points relative to both efficacy and safety criteria would include unanticipated disease transmission if it is linked to the experiments. So you got to be very careful what is happening with because of your experiments. If there's any unanticipated environmental harm that can link to the experiments. If there is, sometimes there may be a political or social opposition, or maybe the phenotype of the GM mosquito deviates significantly from the one intended, then also that would be a no-go points. So go and no-go both have to be clearly defined in your proposal itself, in the application to the regulator itself. Thank you very much. This is a broad idea of this, and as I said, on a case by case we need to actually work what exactly do we would be applicable to my case. Thank you. I purposely kept it small so that we are able to have some time for discussion by or any questions by the participants.
Thank you so much, Doctor. So now it's open for the questions. So we request all the participants to clear their doubts, and even if you have comments or suggestions to share with us regarding this.
Are there any questions in the chat box?
We don't have any questions in chat box. Participants, is there any questions?
I have a question to Professor Tyagi. This is Shanaka from FAO. First of all, thank you very much, Dr. Vibha and Professor Tyagi for the descriptive information provided. So, based on the experience we have with studies done in Malaysia, Cayman Islands, Florida, and Brazil. What can we what did you learn about any actual risk that we have? Like, is there anything that we really have to be concerned with the experience that we learned when it comes to safety, to human health, the environment, or any other safety aspect? Because we are looking at now this risk as mosquitoes going to the environment, but if what are the actual risks that we have to be concerned that we can learn from those studies?
Dr. Vibha, can I speak?
Sure, sir, please.
Thank you. It's a very important question, and I think this is the first question everybody asks. The point is, it depends upon the GM technology in discussion. If we take, for example, the technology of Riddle gene, a very extensive study had been made on whether this kind of technology will be having any harmful effect in future or not. I have been personally witnessed those investigations in many countries, and I find that there is absolutely no, forget about the serious measure, absolutely no chance of any kind of a danger or fear that the general public should be about the technology. The only thing is, it's the perception in the general mind, in the general people's mind, that we are releasing the mosquitoes to control the mosquitoes, and not everybody knows that whether it is the female mosquito which bites or the males don't bite. They only think in this manner that this is being released to possibly enhance the severity of biting in the nature. That is one thing. And the second thing, which is related to the this particular technology, is this, that they fear that the gene which has been genetically introduced into the vector mosquito might possibly transcend or can transfer into some other kind of organism. Particularly, they are worried about the non-target organism. Now, if you see, there are about 500 scientific papers of one kind or another kind related to the this Riddle technology, except one paper, which has very recently occurred in 2019 only, where it had been discovered that the gene was found in other natural population individuals also. Very few. The percentage was very, very low. Nevertheless, it is evident from a large number of the scientific investigation that the gene does not get transcended or get disseminated either horizontally or by any other means in any other organism, including the man. The health of man and environment, by and large, is safe with the technology, and I believe the same thing will possibly occur with other GM technologies. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Professor Tyagi.
So we have a question in the chat box, which is in the last presentation for Dr. Ahuja, yes, unrest in the means of the community, or what it means.
I mean, this is the language they have used in the WHO, but I mean, of course, it means very simple English that if there is a particular place you are doing the trial and that community says that we don't want it, that's what the, kind of, what you say that, non-acceptance by that particular community, they try to harm the trials or anything like that. So then we should try to stop that and don't use that site, but go to the other site. Sometimes these things happen because of the misinformation. Even in the plants, we have seen, that they were in one of the trials in India, there was one group which was very aggressive, and in that particular area, they had the hold, and because of the misinformation, they, damaged the trial. So if you see any such observation within that particular community, or where community here means the people, where you are doing the trial, let's say in a village or a town or whatever, this is what it means. It's a simple English that non-acceptance or some kind of opposition, then it's better to leave the trial, because we want data to be generated from this testing.
Any other question?
Thank you so much, Doctor. If there's any other question?
There's a question.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
So there are experiments carrying out on vector mosquitoes controlling aspects using microorganisms such as Wolbachia species. Can there are interruptions on such programs by genetically modified mosquitoes?
I think Dr. Tyagi can explain this, but I would say that both are, it's not that the problem of, we say this in the plants and we say this in every case, even in mosquitoes. Look at the kind of alarming data which Dr. Tyagi presented. This is not just true for Sri Lanka, even in India, the dengue cases are on the rise. So we always look at, the multiple approaches. There is no single approach which is, at the testing time, we should look at all the approaches, whatever is possible to actually, solve that particular problem. So at this point of time, we are only talking about testing of GM mosquitoes, and testing of GM mosquitoes will definitely not interrupt will not interrupt the testing using Wolbachia or the vice versa. We have to try the multiple programs, and whichever gives the best results, whichever is best suitable for whichever area can be later adopted. We should have a lot of tools in our toolbox so that we can use them appropriately to deal with that particular problem. Sir, would you like to supplement this?
Only one small thing. You rightly said about it. Wolbachia technology is not considered in principle as a GM technology. This is considered or classified as a biological control technology, because you are introducing a whole organism into the body of the whole organism of the mosquito. So this is still not considered as a GM technology. Nevertheless, as you rightly said, because inside the Wolbachia is playing cytoplasmic incompatibility, and then the filial generations are as per the genetic inheritance between the two sets of genomes. Therefore, it is very important, as you rightly said, many approaches have to be always tried out rather than one single particular approach.
Thank you so much, Professor. So now it's open for questions again. Please feel free to ask your questions.
I think there are no questions. So still, if there are any questions you have in mind, we will tomorrow also have time to, deliberate on them.
So, sir, Naina, you wanted to ask something, no? Professor Gunatilagar? Professor Nayana?
There is no sound. Are we closed?
No, not yet.
So we are not able to see the screen, sir. Can you share it again?
There's a question from Professor Nayana wanted to ask something. That's what we are waiting.
Okay.
Yeah, muted me now.
His mic is not working.
Huh?
His mic is.
Professor Naina, you have to unmute yourself.
No, his mic is not working. Actually, he's having some suggestions. I mean, not just himself. They wanted to share the guidelines and get some opinion from the participants.
Okay.
There's a problem, mate.
Doctor, looks like he's having a problem. Professor Nayana is having a problem with his computer microphone. So maybe his screen is also visible. Yeah, maybe tomorrow.
So maybe tomorrow morning, first thing we have his comment.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I think we can close now.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you very, very much, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Vivaan.
Dr. Ahuja for nice presentations and actually enlightening the participants on the field testing and testing. Thank you very much. And
Thank
I
you.
would like to thank all the participants and other consultants who joined today's session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much once again.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.